Hong Kong Mock Examination, English Language Paper 3, Listening and Integrated Skills. Instructions to candidates. You should have on your desk a Part A question-answer book, a Part B1 data file with a Part B1 question-answer book inserted, and a Part B2 data file with a Part B2 question-answer book inserted. Do not open them until you are told to do so. I repeat, do not open the question-answer books or the data files until you are told to do so. Now, write your candidate number in the space provided on page 1 of your Part A question-answer book. Now look at your Part A question-answer book. Check that the Part A question-answer book has no missing pages. Look for the words "End of Part A." Now go on to Part B on the last page. Now stick your barcode labels in the spaces provided on pages 1 and 3. Close your Part A question-answer book when you have finished. Now look at your Part B1 data file. Take out the inserted Part B1 question-answer book. Check that your Part B1 data file has no missing pages. Look for the words "This is the last page of the Part B1 data file" on the last page. Now look at your Part B1 question-answer book. Check that the Part B1 question-answer book has no missing pages. Look for the words "End of Part B1" on the last page. Now stick your barcode label in the space provided on page 1. Now look at your Part B2 data file. Take out the inserted Part B2 question-answer book. Check that your Part B2 data file has no missing pages. Look for the words "This is the last page of the Part B2 data file" on the last page. Now look at your Part B2 question-answer book. Check that the Part B2 question-answer book has no missing pages. Look for the words "End of Part B2" on the last page. Now stick your barcode labels in the spaces provided on pages 1 and 3. Close your Part B2 question-answer book when you have finished. You are reminded that all examination materials will be played once only. The test is divided into two parts, Part A and Part B. You should use a pencil to answer all questions in Part A. For Part B, you can use a pen or a pencil. Put up your hand now if you have any difficulties. It is not possible to handle complaints after you have taken the test. The test is about to begin. Open your Part A question-answer book to page 2. Part A is about to begin.
Part A. Situation. Anna Mack is a project manager of the Public Relations Unit of the Social Welfare Department. She is also an editor of the department's magazine. You will hear several conversations involving Anna discussing various topics related to child and elderly welfare. In Part A, you will have a total of 4 tasks to do. Follow the instructions in the question-answer book and in the recording to complete the tasks. You will find all the information you need in this question-answer book and the recording. You now have 2 minutes to familiarize yourself with tasks 1 to 4.
Task 1. Anna is hosting a sharing session for the Social Welfare Department. The guest speaker of the sharing session is Martin Lamb, an awardee of the Volunteer of the Year 2019 award. Listen to the sharing session and write the information in the spaces below. The first one has been provided as an example. You now have 30 seconds to study the task. At the end of the task, you will have 1 minute to tidy up your answers.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our sharing session this afternoon. Thank you so much to Martin Lamb for being a guest speaker of this sharing session. Congratulations once again for getting the Volunteer of the Year 2019 award. It's good to see you again after our last meeting. I know that you have an extremely touching story to share with us today, don't you? I'm sure our participants will love to know more about your personal experience and what made you so devoted to doing voluntary work.
Sure. Let me share with you a Christmas story of mine, one of courage, life, and love. 20 years ago, Joseph Lamb, a single parent with a 2-year-old son, was driving on his way home in Kowloon after doing some shopping in preparation for their dinner on Christmas Eve. He witnessed a dreadful accident which occurred when the driver of a Toyota carelessly ran a red light and collided with the car in front of his. The impact of the collision killed the driver in the front car immediately, but her 1-year-old baby daughter was crying and trapped upside down in the burning car. The wreckage was doomed to a fiery tomb. Many other drivers and pedestrians were shocked and terrified, but Joseph jumped out of his car and crawled into the burning vehicle through the shattered rear window in an attempt to save the infant. All of a sudden, the vehicle was completely engulfed in flames, but Joseph had miraculously saved the baby daughter. To everybody's surprise, the baby daughter was rescued and came out of the accident unhurt. However, Joseph suffered severe burns over 65% of his body and was sent to the intensive care unit of Queen Mary Hospital. Unfortunately, 1 week later, Joseph died, but his heroic act was published widely in the newspapers all over the city. Joseph's son was adopted by his aunt, and the family moved to Taiwan soon afterwards.
I'm really sad to hear that. Joseph was so heroic to have sacrificed himself to save somebody whom he didn't know. He was surely one of the greatest men whom I have ever heard of.
The most miraculous part of this story unfolded 3 years ago. Jacqueline, my fiancée at the time, and I were looking through some old photo albums in my home as we were looking for interesting photos for our wedding photo album. Suddenly, we came across a number of old newspaper clippings in the old photo albums. "What?" she said. "Why are you keeping those newspaper clippings? That's me when I was a baby. I was saved from a burning vehicle, but my mom died in the car crash." As I heard Jacqueline's story, I was so surprised that I couldn't utter a single sound. Although I knew my fiancé's mom had died many years ago, I never fully knew the cause until we started to go through the newspaper clippings, and Jacqueline continued to reveal her story. After telling me her personal story, she continued to look for some nice photos from the old album for our wedding photo album. But then I was totally absorbed in the details of the car crash. Later on, to her total surprise, she realized that tears were welling up in my eyes, and I started to sob uncontrollably. Jacqueline didn't know what happened, and she was scared by my sudden and dramatic act. I tried to calm myself down, but I couldn't. In between sobs, I finally managed to tell Jacqueline that the middle-aged man who pulled her from the burning vehicle was my dad. Jacqueline was astonished, and she shed tears. We embraced each other and kept on crying that evening, recounting stories which were told to us about our parents and relatives.
Oh my gosh! This is really unbelievable that your father saved your fiancée. Even though you had moved to Taiwan with your aunt, you still managed to find this girl and fall in love with her. This must have been arranged by God.
Actually, after we had calmed down, what really drew our attention were some other details which were unknown to both of us until that moment. According to the newspaper clippings, my father was an enthusiast in doing voluntary work to help the deprived children, the elderly, and the homeless. He was an active volunteer of the Hong Kong Children Foundation, the Hong Kong Society for the Aged, and Christian Concern for the Homeless Association. He always told his friends and co-workers that he had a mission to help the needy and spread love to everyone in the community. When he was free, He offered free tutorial sessions to children from deprived families, brought presents and daily necessities to the elderly who lived alone, and distributed food and blankets to beggars. Because of his charitable acts, he had been presented the Volunteer of the Year 1998 award. My aunt told me that everyone in the family was so proud of my dad. My aunt also said my father did all these charitable acts because of his firm conviction that the best gifts don't come from the gift received, but from those given. Being a humble person, as described by my aunt, my dad remained anonymous in doing all these acts of charity. As we chatted a lot about each other's story that evening, I found out that Jacqueline's mother, who passed away in the car crash when she was 1 year old, had also been involved in many similar volunteer services for the community. The concepts of destiny and fate were so fascinating to us. Our fates are written. Life is miraculous. In honor of our parents and the desire to share the gift of life, Jacqueline and I have committed ourselves to carrying out more similar acts of kindness to people in need in our society. Thank you again for giving me the Volunteer of the Year 2019 award. I dedicate this award to my dad and Jacqueline's mom.
I feel sorry for the loss of your father and Jacqueline's mother, but I'm sure they would feel proud to have a son and daughter who are so kind-hearted to spread their spirits to the people in need in our society. Your story reminds me of a famous quote, "Keep your face always toward the sunshine, and shadows will fall behind you." Even though there may be hardship, misery, and tragedy in our lives, the gift of love will transcend all material obstacles and bring greater hope for people who are downtrodden and low in spirit. Happy marriage to both of you.
This is the end of Task 1. You now have 1 minute to tidy up your answers. Task 2. Anna is hosting another program called Effective Learning and You. She has invited Dr. Michael Chow to the program to share his research findings about language learning. Listen to the conversation and write the information in the spaces below. The first one has been provided as an example. You now have 30 seconds to study the task. At the end of the task, you will have 1 minute to tidy up your answers.
Good evening and welcome to Effective Learning and You, jointly presented by the Social Welfare Department and the Education Bureau. I'm Anna, a representative from the department. Our guest is a world-known language expert, Dr. Michael Chow, who has sparked a great deal of attention over the past decades for his research in the area of cognitive psychology and language learning. His new book, Learning English is Just a Piece of Cake, has been on the bestseller list for the past few months. Welcome to our program, Dr. Chow.
Hello, Miss Anna. Hello, audience. It's my pleasure to be here.
Right. Dr. Chow, do you mind telling us more about the title of your book, Learning English is Just a Piece of Cake, please?
Well, as I've shared in my book, one of the most important key points about learning the English language is to establish a regular study timetable or program, like planning 15 minutes every morning around breakfast time and another 15 minutes every evening around dinner time. Within these short sessions, learners may read English newspapers, watch English TV programs, listen to English radio programs, or read English fiction. Alternatively, users may send text messages in English to their friends so as to use the language.
Sorry for saying this, but your idea may sound a little bit too simplistic to our audience. For my case, I'm a native English speaker and I have been learning French as my second language. I took French as my minor in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and I studied French for 2 years in the university. I was even selected to be an exchange student to Université Charles Moulin Lyon 3 and stay in Lyon, France for half a year. But unfortunately, I didn't become a proficient speaker of French. I was really disappointed about my incapability in learning French as a second language.
Well, I totally understand that there are many people like you who feel that way. Actually, I'm not saying that we can become a fluent second language speaker in a matter of a few days here and there, but rather following a regular, consistent, and focused course of study timetable or program can help us get on the path to the promised land of second language mastery. Also, you should understand that there is a huge difference between native fluency and proficiency in any language, no matter whether it's English or French, and I am proposing the latter. It's just unrealistic and impractical to request any non-native speaker to speak like a native.
All right, I get what you mean. I know that you have quoted some psychological theories in your book. Do you mind telling us some of the basic key points which you are suggesting in it?
Sure. As I just mentioned, people should plan out their study timetables or programs by setting realistic and attainable goals right from the beginning. I mean, some people get caught up in the craze of learning the language in a week, only to become disenchanted when they don't perform up to their unrealistic expectations. Remember, small steps, little by little, step by step, are the key. For example, planning to learn 7 new vocabulary items a day and to learn to use these vocabulary items actively is far better than learning 100 and then forgetting them the next day. In fact, this concept is well supported by a famous theory in cognitive psychology called the magical number 7 plus or minus 2, suggesting that ordinary people can remember around 5 to 9 new items under most natural circumstances. But of course, there are always ways for us to enhance our learning potential.
Wow! Now you have talked about something related to maximizing our learning potential by learning about our own individual learning styles. I'm sure our audience are interested in this topic. Can you elaborate more on that part, please?
Of course. People often have different ways of learning and approach learning tasks differently. Some people are visual learners who prefer to see models of the patterns they are expected to learn. Others are auditory learners who favor hearing instructions, for example, over reading them. Some others are kinesthetic learners, and these learners prefer a physical or hands-on learning approach. As a matter of fact, our preferences are determined by many different factors. For instance, our personality, culture, and customs, and past personal experience.
Wow, interesting. Dr. Chow, can you tell us which learning style you prefer?
Well, I assume I'm a tactile learner.
You mean the kinesthetic one who learns through hands-on experience?
Yes, exactly. That's smart of you.
Well, I have a question. What's next after knowing a person's learning style? How does knowing our learning styles benefit us?
Well, this might seem a little bit unusual to some people, but moving around while attempting to learn and memorize materials helps me a great deal since I'm a kinesthetic learner. While I'm cutting up mushrooms and onions for my spaghetti for lunch at noon, I might recite aloud vocabulary items to the rhythm of the knife. But it is vitally important to remember that usually our learning styles are not exclusive in nature, but are often very multidimensional. For example, a person can be visual and audio at the same time, or audio and kinesthetic at the same time, or visual and kinesthetic at the same time, or even a careful combination of the three types of learning styles. What we should bear in mind is that a person with a certain learning style tends to learn more effectively in a situation which is compatible to his own learning style.
Wow, that's amazing. I'd also like to become an effective language learner. Well, I don't need to improve my English anymore as I'm already a native English speaker, but I'd really like to improve my French. I hope to meet a handsome French guy. So Dr. Chow, please tell me, what is my learning style?
Hey, you'll have to read my book to find that out. Read it, and I'm sure it will benefit you a lot in your language learning.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Chow, for joining us. We have just found out some interesting knowledge from Dr. Michael Chow, author of the new book, Learning English is Just a Piece of Cake. In the next episode, we'll have another guest to share his insights and knowledge about learning. Good evening.
My pleasure. Good evening. This is the end of Task 2. You now have 1 minute to tidy up your answers. Task 3. Anna is requested by her department head, the director of the Social Welfare Department, Mr. Ma Wing-man, to be the host of a seminar for the department. Listen to the speech in the seminar and complete the notes below. You have 30 seconds to study the task. At the end of the task, you will have 1 minute to tidy up your answers.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today's seminar, Dr. Paul Chen Ka-chun. Dr. Chen graduated from the Faculty of Sociology of the Chinese University of Hong Kong in 1981. He began his career as a social worker specializing in the provision of elderly services, first at Princess Margaret Hospital of Hong Kong, and then at the Hospital Authority. In 1992, Dr. Chen received his master and doctoral degrees in social science from the University of Edinburgh in the United Kingdom. At present, Dr. Chen is the Associate Professor of the Faculty of Social Science at the University of Hong Kong. He has already written over 1,000 journal articles and books on the issues facing Hong Kong's seniors in our graying society for the past 30 years. Dr. Chen is one of the most famous experts in the study of elderly issues in Hong Kong. Dr. Chen, please.
Thank you for that introduction. It's very generous of you. Today, I'd like to preface my remarks from a personal story of my own, which highlights our common concerns that bring us here together, elderly issues in Hong Kong. 5 years ago, my grandparents were well into their 90s. At that time, they were facing the cruel reality of no longer being able to take care of themselves. My grandmother spoke of her greatest fear, that of leaving the only house in Sheungshui which she had known for the past 70 years. Fighting back the tears, she spoke proudly of the fact that she had built their house from the ground up, and that she had pounded every nail and laid every brick in the construction process. The prospect of having to sell their house and give up their independence and original lifestyle and move into an elderly home was an extremely traumatic idea for both of them. It was, in my grandfather's own words, like having a limb severed off. Both of them were quite emphatic, exclaiming that they felt they weren't important to their children and grandchildren anymore. For them and some older Hong Kongers, their so-called silver years are at times not so pleasant, for this period can mean the decline of not only one's well-being but also the loss of independence, identity, and self-worth. In many communities, this self-identity is closely related with our social hierarchy, career, material possessions, or physical independence. Furthermore, we often live in societies that emphasize what is considered as new or trendy, and our own usage of lexicon in the English language often does not bode well for senior citizens in Hong Kong. I mean, how would your family react if you came home tonight, elated, exclaiming, "Hey dear, come to the living room and have a look at the old black and white TV which I brought"? I'm sure everybody in your family would be amused. Unfortunately, the word old conjures up images of the need to replace or discard. This is sad, but this is true to many of us in this cruel society. Now, many of the lectures given at this seminar have concentrated on the issues of pension reform, medical care, and the reconstruction of toilet facilities for the elderly. Although these are important issues which must be addressed, I'd like to focus my comments on some other underlying issues that will affect the overall success of the Reformation programs as mentioned. This has to do with realigning our mindset on what it refers to be a part of this group and looking for meaningful roles which the elderly can play and should play in our community. To begin with, I'd like to point out that psychiatric emergencies are typical among the senior citizens. Diagnosis and treatment may pose a huge challenge because of the high incidence of medical and neurological comorbidities, psychosocial problems, and adverse effects of medications. The most common psychiatric emergencies in this population are depression with suicidality and substance abuse, accompanied by aggression. Our society must take better care of the psychology of its senior citizens, lest tragedies may happen. Secondly, malnutrition in older adults over the age of 60 is often underdiagnosed and may lead to other elderly health issues, such as a worsened immune system and muscle weakness. There are many causes of malnutrition. It may stem from limited income, other health problems such as dementia, whereby the elderly may forget to eat, depression, alcoholism, dietary restrictions, and reduced social contact. To help nutritional problems in the elderly, we may encourage them to commit to small changes in diet. For instance, they may increase their consumption of fruits and vegetables and decrease their consumption of saturated fat and salt. There are food services available to the elderly who cannot afford food or have difficulties in preparing meals. Thirdly, we should prevent the elderly from getting physical injuries. Every hour, there is a senior citizen admitted to the emergency room for a bad fall. Worse still, a senior citizen dies from falling every day. This makes it the leading cause of injury among the elderly. Since aging causes bones to shrink and muscles to lose control, strength, and flexibility, the elderly are more susceptible to losing their balance, bruising, and fracturing their bones. There are two diseases which contribute to frailty, and they are osteoporosis and osteoarthritis. Fortunately, falls are not inevitable. In most cases, they can be prevented through education and enhanced awareness, increased physical activity, and practical modifications within their homes. To conclude, there are many elderly issues which we should pay attention to and help solve for the sake of the senior citizens, including your parents or grandparents, who have made great contributions to Hong Kong in their lifetimes. Without them, we won't be here. If you are interested to learn more about how to help the elderly, you may read more of my journal articles to learn more about the preventative measures for common elderly health issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chen, for being with us today. May we now invite the Director of the Social Welfare Department, Mr. Ma Wingman, to present a souvenir to Dr. Chen. Mr. Ma and Dr. Chen, please.
This is the end of Task 3. You now have 1 minute to tidy up your answers. Task 4. Anna is interviewing Mr. Philip Chow, a social worker of the Social Welfare Department, for the department's magazine. Listen to the interview and complete the answers below. You have 30 seconds to study the task. At the end of the task, you will have 3 minutes to tidy up your answers.
Thanks for being our interviewee, Mr. Wong. It's great to have you for our upcoming issue. Many of us have heard of your great work in helping the homeless. We'd like to educate our readers about homelessness and how we can help these homeless people. Can you tell us more about the situations in Hong Kong and why people are losing their homes, please?
Yes, sure. Homelessness is a problem almost everywhere we go around the globe, but we usually don't think much about it unless it touches or affects our lives in a personal way. In Hong Kong, homelessness is getting more and more common, which is a sad phenomenon in this metropolitan city. Sadly, as humans, we often come up with overly simplified causes as to why people are living on the street, in McDonald's restaurants, or in homeless shelters, and this bias often restricts us from finding real compassion for the people in need in our society. Some prominent causes may include unemployment, alcoholism, substance abuse, a poor family relationship, a traumatic event, or a natural hazard which damages or destroys a family's home. Actually, the facts on homelessness are stark.
Well, just now you've mentioned there are homeless people staying in McDonald's restaurants. I've heard of some newspapers describing them as McRefugees. Can you tell us more about this?
McRefugees are homeless people who stay in McDonald's restaurants as their homes. They can be found in many 24-hour branches in Hong Kong. Among all the homeless people in Hong Kong, more than 1/3 are McRefugees.
Oh no, I didn't imagine there are so many McRefugees in Hong Kong. No wonder it's described as one of the saddest phenomena in our society. I'm wondering if most Mac refugees are elderly?
Not really. In Hong Kong, at least 3,000 people are homeless, with about a third of those being young adults. There are several points which we should pay attention to. First, about 1/5 of the McRefugees suffer from a mental health issue. Second, around 1/3 of the female McRefugees have been the victims of domestic abuse. Third, over half of the McRefugees are employed. However, unfortunately, the costs of living for many of these people are just far beyond their limited incomes. Therefore, they prefer staying and living in McDonald's restaurants rather than renting a flat. As a matter of fact, social workers like me have been trying to persuade these McRefugees to move to the homeless shelters, as the living conditions in these shelters tend to be better. However, most of these homeless people are reluctant to live in a shelter owing to various reasons. As we can't really force these adults to move to the shelter, what we social workers can do is to distribute food vouchers to them to make sure that they won't suffer from malnutrition. Also, we visit them regularly in order to ensure that they have enough medicine and other necessities to keep them physically healthy.
I understand that some people, even some social workers, may feel uncomfortable in helping the homeless, as they can be quite untidy and smelly sometimes. But there are actually many things which ordinary people can do to alleviate the pain and suffering of the homeless who are in desperate need of help. Can you share with us some methods how we ordinary people can help the homeless?
This is easy. You just need to assume that person needs help, and you offer help to him or her. It's as easy as ABC. As I don't want to label these people in a negative manner, I try not to think that the person's plight has been self-inflicted. One evening, my girlfriend and I were having our dinner in a McDonald's restaurant in Tsim Sha Tsui. Suddenly, a homeless old lady approached us for money. In an attempt to set aside any prejudice or preconceived feeling about her intentions, my girlfriend and I simply invited her to join us for a meal. You may find it unbelievable. It turned out to be a nice chat during the meal. The old lady shared with us her history, hopes, and dreams. She told us that her son had committed suicide 10 years ago, which had almost driven her crazy. As she really couldn't bear staying in the same flat and reminiscing about the good old days with her son, she decided to sell her flat and live on the street. After all these years, she has recovered from the trauma, and now she has a positive mindset. Even though she doesn't have a home, she is trying to offer help to people in need. Whenever she saw youngsters who have argued with their parents and are straying on the streets, she would talk to them patiently in an attempt to soothe their souls. She just doesn't want to have another young person following in her son's footsteps. And when our meal was over, we expressed our wishes to her and went home. After chatting with this homeless old lady, it made me truly believe that there are many reasons leading to homelessness, and each person has a different sad story. Above all, we should avoid stereotyping or stigmatizing the homeless.
Yes, you're right. This is really thought-provoking. Sometimes the homeless people just need help to get through the day. Philip, you had done a really great job. One last question. Do you have any final remarks for our readers?
Well, my intention in telling this story isn't to show how generous we were for helping the homeless old lady. As a matter of fact, so many other people serve the needy humbly and anonymously in far greater ways than I do. I must confess that there have been several times that I haven't been as compassionate enough as I could have been. By telling this story, rather, I just want to say that ordinary people like us can make a huge difference in the small acts of generosity we do every day. Even if we are living on a tight budget, we can still offer help to the homeless. It can be as simple as acknowledging the homeless when you encounter one of them on the street or in the subway. Alternatively, you can just say a simple hello Talk to them for a few minutes and engage in a simple conversation. When you are willing to take your time to learn about your homeless neighbor in your community, you will get to know more about them, and one day you'll be able to figure out how you can help them.
You've made an excellent point. Thank you so much for being our interviewee, Philip. Indeed, homelessness brings a sense of loneliness which may erode the core of a person's self-confidence and self-value. Just a simple smile and a few words can make a significant difference to the homeless people in a day full of hardship. Thanks again.
This is the end of Task 4. You now have 1.5 minutes to tidy up your answers. Part B. Look at page 2 of your data file. Situation. You are Bonnie Ma. You are a TV host at Television Hong Kong Limited, THKB. Your boss is Mr. Jackson Lam, a senior program producer at THKB. You will be hosting a TV episode about parenting. Mr. Jackson Lam has asked you to do some tasks. You will listen to the conversation in a TV talk show between you and your guest, Dr. Gary Yu. Take notes under the appropriate headings. Before the recording is played, you will have 5 minutes to study the question-answer book and the data file to familiarize yourself with the situation and the tasks. Complete the tasks by following the instructions in the question-answer book and on the recording. You will find all the information you need in the question-answer book, the data file, and on the recording. As you listen, you can make notes on page 3 of the data file. You now have 5 minutes to familiarize yourself with the question-answer book and the data file. recording is about to begin. Turn to page 3 of the data file.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our program A Lovely Family on THKB Channel 33. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Dr. Gary Yu Chak-wai, Director of the Hong Kong Family Welfare Society. He is also the author of the new parenting book, Successful Parenting Skills Which Are Worth Your Time.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's an honor to be here on your program today.
Thanks, Dr. Yu. I know it's your first time to be on TV, and I know it's your first time to write a book. It's amazing your book has been on the bestseller list for weeks. So, do you mind telling us what inspired you to become a writer?
It's quite straightforward. I think I've got a story, and it needs to be told. Sometimes people may think their stories have been told, or similar stories have been told, but like what my boss told me a few years ago, even though a similar story has been told, it does not mean that it has been told by me. I can always offer a unique perspective, formed by my own practical experience and the way how I see the world, that only I can share. Therefore, I know I should write a book to share my thoughts and experience with the other parents and educators.
Right. Why did you pick parenting as the topic of your new book? Most people prefer writing science fiction as a first-time writer.
Well, I was disappointed to realize that not a single existing guidebook can fully prepare parents for what awaits them nowadays on the front lines. Therefore, I became determined to write my own book to share the most up-to-date practices in response to our ever-changing society and issues which our children face.
Yes, of course. There are many new challenges for parents nowadays. Do you mind if I ask a personal question, Dr. Yu? How many children do you have?
I have 2 sons and 2 daughters.
What? Really? That's really a lot. Very few families in Hong Kong have 4 kids. I'm so surprised.
Yeah, and all 4 kids of mine are so different and unique in their character, abilities, and many other aspects. My wife and I are so happy with the kids. There's never a boring moment in our family.
Well, I bet there's not. Actually, I've got 2 children already. The kids are bringing much fun to our family. They never make us feel dull for a single second.
Yes, exactly. That's what I meant.
Let's come back to your latest book. Many parents want their kids to be successful. But it's a very abstract description. What do you mean by successful in your book?
Well, actually, I associate success with understanding and managing children's feeling, emotions, mental health, and even spiritual welfare. I should point out that I'm not talking about the most common standard definition of success. I don't associate success with financial or educational gains. I think that's a parenting misbelief. In my opinion, there are many elements which are far more important than money and grades.
Yeah, you have a point.
Another common parenting misbelief is that it is conventionally said that becoming a parent is a job which you can land without any experience or credentials. I can reassure you, this is not true. I guess many people would say that through trial and error, everyone can gradually become a better parent. But most of the time, making parenting mistakes brings high and painful costs. From my personal experience as a parent and everyday encounters with so many parents at the Hong Kong Family Welfare Society, I realized that I must figure out some basic rules for everyone to become a better parent. I mean, for myself, and before I got married, I had already read countless books on child development and child psychology to try to prepare myself and my other half for this transitional phase in our own lives to become parents. But later on, I realized that every family and situation is so different and unique, whilst the challenges of bringing up children are always very complex. You know, people can get angry and depressed easily. This is not something which we encourage, but that's a part of life. Many parents just ask their kids not to feel unhappy or furious. But if we just tell our children not to be unhappy or furious, this denies the naturalness of these feelings. This doesn't teach our kids how to overcome the hard feeling and how to cope with their emotions.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes my children get angry with me too when I don't let them have ice cream. So, do you mean it's alright if they get angry sometimes?
Yes, that's right. We are humans and we do get angry and emotional sometimes. Just like everybody else, there must be moments when you and I get angry. That's natural. We should also let the kids understand that we do know how they feel. However, this can also be a common mistake that many parents often make, saying, I know how you feel.
Yeah, I remember my mom always said that when I was young. To be honest, that's a bit annoying. When I was a kid, I felt bored to have a nagging mother.
That's the point. Many parents often say these kinds of words because they think they have tens of years of experience. But this just sounds condescending to the kids and may push them away. You know, teenagers can be the hardest creatures on this planet to understand.
Well, I think my little son is for sure. In the heat of the moment when we are having an argument or disagreement, it's typical for us to say something which we'll regret later.
That's the point. Well, what I'm saying is that humans all get angry sometimes, but learning how to express the anger or other negative emotions properly is the key. I'm not going to digress here, but if people are anticipating a simple textbook solution for understanding and bringing up a child, they really should read my book.
Wow, you're not only an expert in education, but also a good salesperson. Haha. Let's get back to parenting. So, for all the parents out there struggling to raise their kids, what they can do as parents is to better understand the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of the kids. Is that what you mean?
Well, let me put it in this way. When we first get married and promise to love and cherish our wife or husband, some of us are contemplating the potential risks and challenges which we may face 10, 20, or 30 years later down the road. But no matter what we are thinking, we won't say to our partners or future spouses, "Hey, my dear, there's a good chance we will get divorced a few years later." I'm sure nobody would say that to their wives or husbands right from the very beginning. In fact, nobody knows what may happen in the future, but it appears to be a blessing that we don't have a crystal ball to look into the future. Similarly, we can never predict what may happen to our children, but then we still have to get prepared for every possibility, and when that moment arrives, we should know how to cope with that feeling or help our kids to cope with it. For instance, when a child gets a bad grade, rather than blaming him for the poor performance, his parents should teach him how to respond to the disappointment.
I agree. I know there are many unpredictable challenges in raising a child. I feel glad that we don't know what's coming up in the future. Indeed, we as parents shouldn't worry too much about our children. There is always a way to solve the problems. I always believe that we just need to do our best and God will do the rest.
Exactly. Even though we often hear stories about the difficulties in bringing up a child, all these obstacles can be overcome somehow. Of course, we should face the realities of life sooner or later. We must accept the fact that our emotional toolbox may provide us with the emotional, physical, and mental strength later on when we really need to draw from it.
Do you mind giving us a few examples? Like when?
Sure. To start with, parents should understand that there are many influential factors that affect how our children grow up and develop. These factors include their genes, peer groups, school environment, and education within the home. Especially for toddlers, imitation marks a major milestone. Acting just like their parents is a giant step towards learning all about themselves. In other words, children do copy their parents' behavior. Parents should really take notice of what they say and what they do, lest parents might pass some undesirable habits to their children.
True. I agree that all of these would really affect kids. Often little boys copy their fathers and little girls model their mothers.
Exactly. That's what I'd like to point out. We must understand children's learning mechanism. For most kids, imitation follows a 4-step process: watching and listening, processing the information, attempting to copy a behavior, and practicing. Therefore, as parents, we should have greater control over some of our behavior than others.
Do you mind if I just interject for a moment, please?
Go ahead.
In my belief, peer pressure might have an even greater influence on children. Do you mind telling us more about how peer pressure affects kids?
Yes, actually, there are many factors affecting children. Our parenting skills is one. Before moving on to the next point, I'd like to remind parents that even though we have the ability to influence our children, parents should not take the blame for their children's wrongdoings. I say this because I think many parents often beat themselves up emotionally and think they must bear all the blame for any of their children's misbehavior. In other words, even though parents have an impact on their children's decisions and attitudes, we can't ignore the fact that kids tend to follow the popular crowd, and their actions often mirror this. Peer influence is the next point which I'd like to emphasize. When kids want to feel accepted and valued by their friends, they would choose to do something they otherwise wouldn't do. Indeed, a prominent part of being a teenager is the susceptibility to peer influence. Parents should teach their kids how to cope with peer pressure properly.
That's right. Responding to peer pressure is part of human nature, but some people may be more likely to give in, and others may be better able to resist and stand their ground. What else?
Parents need to establish clear boundaries and expectations for their kids and be consistent on how they implement the expectations. I'd like to emphasize that children, especially young ones, often consider rules as a way to limit their freedom when, in fact, parents are just in an attempt to protect them from the possible dangers of their behavior. But when children feel that they're being treated fairly, they will be more than willing to accept the rules or social norms. One point to bear in mind is that when children can earn greater latitude in what they are allowed to do, they would no longer consider rules and social norms as things that limit their freedom.
That makes a lot of sense. Consistency is the key point. I've really learned a lot from what you said. Thank you. Do you mind sharing one more point with us?
Sure. As a final remark, parents should always try to establish good lines of communication with their spouses and children. They should always be open to their ideas, and lavishing them with compliments can build reserves in their emotional bank accounts. Moreover, by doing this, parents can foster more positive relationships with their children.
That's definitely true. So, any closing remarks on parenting skills before we have to go?
Well, I really have a lot to say, but I understand that time is running short. All I can say is that parents can never give up on their own children, even when they shout, yell, and scream in our faces. It's difficult, but parents are the kids' ultimate mental and physical support, and they can't just abandon their own kids.
Thank you so much. It is indeed an important message and excellent book. Thank you for joining our show today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you. This is the end of the listening component of this test. You will have 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete the written tasks in either Part B1 or B2. An announcement will be made when time is up.